Peter, and I'm here with my co-host Leigh.
Hello.
And today, I hope you brought your swim trunks, because we're going to be talking about the tsunami terror in Japan.
Oh, man.
So I haven't mentioned this on the last couple ones. It's been mentioned on our Twitter, in case you follow us, at DisasterPod, also on Instagram. But we draw most of these, inspiration for most of these disasters from a Reader's Digest book called Great Disasters. So like we will flip through, pick a disaster, and then do our own sort of research to back up what's in the book. So today's disaster is on book. We're going to be calling those on book. So this is an on book disaster. So tsunami terror in Japan. So we're going back to Japan in 1896.
Cool.
And I thought it'd be cool to start with a little bit of context, because I always like putting things into a historical context when I think about dates.
Yes.
So for context, the Wild West spanned from 1607 to 1912.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time. But so during this time, it was technically part of the Wild West.
Okay.
Interestingly, if you remember last episode when we were talking about the Great Fire of London,
Yes.
same time that cowboys were taming the untamed West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems incredible.
I know, that stuff always blows my mind.
You know, different cultures, different paths.
Yeah. Like you got 6 shooters and horses at the same time that you've got King Charles II trying to put out a fire in London.
Yeah.
It just seems like such a disconnect and so interesting.
Yeah.
Some more context. A nice little touchstone for me lately has been the Donner Party.
Right.
That we've been talking about. That was 1875 that they were crossing the United States.
Okay.
So that's closer to what we're talking about today, 1896. The Napoleonic War was 1803 to 1815. So again, that was like early 1800s. And that was about like 60, 70 years before what we're talking about today.
Right.
Which is another, like, when you think back 70 years, that's like the Second World War at this point.
Yeah.
And then the Titanic sinks in 1912.
Which is like
that's a couple of years.
Practically recent.
That's like 30 or 20 years after what we're talking about today.
Right.
So yeah, interesting to contextualize everything.
I remember when I was a kid being very fascinated by the fact that my great-grandmother, who lived, I think I was 12 or 13 when she died, she was born in 1890 something.
Okay. Yeah.
Something around there. And that, to me, that was like, wow.
Yeah.
You are old,
right.
Grammy.
Yeah. But then, yeah. It's cool to have like these touchstones. Like 1890, that's like 20 years before World War I.
Yeah.
And World War I, it was a long time ago, but it also wasn't that long ago.
No. It's hard to keep it all straight and in your brain because, like you said, there's cowboys at the same time as kings.
Yeah.
It seems odd.
The world's a crazy place. Let's put it that way. So we're going to be talking about the Senriku district of Japan, and we'll get into a little bit more detail of like locations and everything. Mm-hmm. But I thought it'd be good to start by jumping a little bit back in time.
Yeah. Because
you'll hear that tsunamis are not necessarily an isolated incident in the region that we're talking about.
Okay.
So there's this book that was officially commissioned by the Japanese government called the Nihon Sandai Jitsuroku. And it's basically a history book that was completed in 901 AD.
Wow.
So like ancient history.
We're going back.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about an earthquake and an event that happened in the same region in 869 AD. So 1,000 years before what we're talking about today. So there was, and maybe I'll just quote from the book right here. So on the 9th of July, 869, a large earthquake occurred in Mutsu province with some strange light in the sky. And Mutsu province is an old province in Japan that includes, among other cities, Fukushima, which might also ring a bell.
It's no stranger to disasters.
Yeah, exactly. So again, continuing from that book, people shouted and cried, lay down and could not stand up. Some were killed by the collapsed houses, others by the landslides. Horses and cattle got surprised, madly rushed around, injured others. Enormous, but basically a giant earthquake hit this same region. And with that earthquake, it came a huge rumbling from the sea.
Yikes.
Sounded like a giant thunderstorm. And the sea surface suddenly rose up, and the huge waves attacked the land.
Oh, good
They
Lord.
raged like nightmares and immediately reached the city center. The waves spread thousands of yards from the beach, and we could not see how large the devastated area was. This was 1,000 years before we're talking about today.
Okay.
So.
Not the first time.
No, not the first time. And actually, I know that we're only 4 episodes in at this point, but I'm gonna state something here. And I'm gonna say that tsunamis so far are my favorite disaster.
Really?
We'll get to more, and we'll talk about why they're my favorite.
Okay.
But like doing this research for this, disasters, tsunamis are legit.
They are fascinating.
And yeah, you'll see. I'll get into why. Like
Okay. Yeah.
And maybe we'll do a little comparison with other disasters. But we'll see. Okay.
I don't know if I have a favorite. I have to think about it.
I know, right? Like, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Well,
but,
it's like, I don't have a favorite.
And I'm not just saying that because I half-assed a project on tsunamis in the 4th grade that went terribly.
Did you create a tsunami?
out of plasticine. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
did.
thought maybe you made everyone
No.
in your class drenched.
Cannonball. No. No, I just, it was like, I think I did it like last minute and I just made a tsunami out of plasticine and then
You just
like,
took some blue clay and made a little wave.
basically, I did exactly a little wave. And this was like when you would do like those science fair, like posters with the 3 sides.
Yeah,
and stand them up
sure.
and, like hand wrote a bunch of, it's
Wow.
embarrassing to
How
think
far
about.
you've come,
Yeah.
PhD-er.
Now my posters have 4 sides. So,
I would love it if you had to do projects in law school like that.
yeah, seriously.
Anyway.
So, flash forward 1,000 years, one
right.
millennium later. It's a gloomy day in the Sanriku district.
Okay.
Northeastern, and this is the northeastern corner of the main island of Japan.
Okay.
So if you picture the island,
Yep.
it's sort of up in the northeast.
Right.
People were preparing to celebrate a popular Shinto festival and the return of soldiers from the First Sino-Japanese War. War between China and Japan over influence in Korea.
Right.
So I looked it up a little, and this possibly was a reference to the festival of Oharai, or the Grand Purification Festival. And this is basically the ritual whose purpose is the purification of sins and uncleanliness,
Okay.
including, ironically, we'll see bad luck.
And usually purification is washed away
Well,
by water.
that's-
It's
yeah,
quite
so maybe-
symbolic for that kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't have... don't mess with things you don't understand.
Careful what you wish for. Yep. Go on.
So the streets were packed and buzzing with people preparing for the celebration. And not just locals, there were visitors to the coastline wanting to join in on the celebrations. Just picture like a buzzing, bustling city
Sure.
in 1896.
Right. Big doings.
Yeah. So the rain finally stops in the early evening and the sky clears. And you can even picture that, that after rain smell. I don't know if they had concrete, but like that smell.
There's that smell. It's
yeah,
nice.
it smells a little bit like watermelon. It's like that springy kind of,
Oh,
I don't know.
yeah.
I guess idioms weren't invented until the 20th century because otherwise people might realize that was the calm before the storm. But
We don't have that yet.
no, Shakespeare is not for. Actually, we tweeted about that. Shakespeare had already happened at this point. I think he died
yes.
in 15.
Yeah.
So it was about 50 years before the fire.
He'd laid the groundwork for sure, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, just a little correction from last time. Right. So, trouble underfoot. At around 7:30 p.m., the district was rocked by a series of long-lasting shocks.
Okay.
So just like picture things rattling and like shaking. But,
Low level.
yeah,
Okay.
kind of like, that's odd.
Probably nothing.
But actually, that was the attitude, and that's another interesting parallel to the Fire of London because earthquakes are pretty common in this region, so
Right.
nobody really noticed. It was
Right.
just like shaking. All right, they do kind of like grab all their plates, make sure they don't fall off the shelves.
Shaking again.
Yeah,
It's Tuesday.
but people did notice when 20 minutes later the sea pulled away from the shore.
Okay.
We're getting into why tsunamis are my favorite. So imagine you're standing there and like boats were torn away from their anchorages and where there was water a minute ago, now there were fish flapping helplessly on the mud. So when I say the water pulls away, it's not like, you're at a beach and it like ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
It's like, I can see where my dock is attached.
Right.
And I can see parts that I'm not supposed to see.
In a matter of minutes.
Yeah. Like this was like 20 minutes after the earthquake and it happened like quickly.
Jeez.
So, gets better. Following the disappearance of the sea was a deafening, relentless boom whose volume increased rapidly. And the people, some of the accounts say that it sounded like 1,000 cannons firing all at once.
What's happening? Tell me what's happening. Tell me more.
It's just
Peter. Tell me more.
Okay, well here we
Intrigued.
come. Here we come. Within minutes, the population of Senrico went from dismissing just another earthquake to being stared down by a mountainous 30-meter wall of water.
Oh, good Lord.
30 meter is about, I'll give you some stats here. So it came roaring towards the land at an estimated speed of 800 kilometers an hour.
Shut up.
That is...
It's the Millennium Falcon of tidal waves.
I looked it up. Commercial jets fly at approximately between 740 and 930.
Okay.
So it's right in that sweet spot of like a 737 flying you to Europe.
Right.
Yeah. So, and here's some more comparisons. The Empire State Building was 443 meters to the tip of the spire.
Okay.
381 for the building itself. So the tidal wave was approximately 10 stories high.
Okay.
And maybe here's a better comparison because the 10 stories high, like go stand outside. Most people probably live in at least a 2-story house.
Right.
Picture 5 times the height of your house.
Right.
Yeah, like you live in a 2-story. Just like
Live in a
imagine
2-story, picture 5 of those. You're feeling pretty small.
not insignificant.
New.
So people try to run for high ground, obviously,
That's what I do.
but can you run faster than a 737?
I'm sure as hell going to try.
Right. So I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole here because I realized that tsunamis are bitchin'. No offense to the sufferers of tsunamis, but as a disaster. So
As
I decided
a phenomenon of nature,
yeah.
they're quite incredible.
As far as disasters go.
Yes.
Yeah. So I decided to do a little sidebar on what is a tsunami.
Sidebar.
Yeah. Picture, yeah. This is, I'm making up for that grade 4 project right now.
Okay.
So the ancient Japanese believed tsunamis to be expressions of divine wrath. Sound familiar?
Okay. Yeah.
Plague of Athens.
Yeah.
Something bad happens. Where do we start? Okay. The gods are punishing us.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, they're giant waves caused by undersea earthquakes, landslides, or volcanic eruptions.
Right.
And that's something that I never thought of that's interesting. They're distinguished from normal waves, which are caused by wind.
Yes.
And they're also distinguished from the tides, which are caused by the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun,
Yeah.
which sure would suck if the sun died. Spoiler.
Let's hope the sun doesn't die.
Yeah, let's hope that we don't talk about that in the future. But like the common name tidal wave, because they're called tidal waves, and they're neither a tidal. They're not the tides,
No.
and they're not necessarily technically a wave because they're not caused by the wind. But it comes from their initial lethargic climb. So what's really interesting is that it's basically a very gradual, like you have this earthquake or you have this instigating event, and then it's a very gradual sort of undulation, which can look more like a rapidly rising tide rather than a breaking wave.
Okay.
And so tsunamis are actually, turns out, a series of waves. So if you picture like dropping a stone in the water,
Yeah.
and like how it ripples out,
Right.
that's basically what a tsunami is.
Sure.
It's caused by something physical, not just the wind.
On a much larger scale.
Exactly. Yeah. So in deep water, the wavelength, so the distance between tips of like these two different waves, it can be kilometers long.
Right.
And the forward speed, and this is, okay, so you know how the prototypical image of a tsunami is like this wave of water coming at you?
Yeah.
Like so far, the way that we're describing it is like this gradual, like where does the actual wall come from?
Yeah.
So the forward speed of one of these tsunamis is proportional to how deep the water is.
Okay.
So like the deeper the water is, the faster it's traveling.
Okay.
So when the tsunami reaches the shore where there's shallower water, the front edge of the wave slows down. And the rest of the wave is still going at 800 kilometers an hour.
Okay.
So like
Then
it
you
gets
get your
slowed
curl.
down. Exactly. It gets slowed down by the shallow water.
Sure.
And then the rest of it's like, remember in high school, there'd always be like, you're like walking at a certain pace and then that front row of people would decide to stop and have a fucking conversation right in the hallway. Yeah. And everyone just like plows into them.
Yep.
Front of the wave are the conversation havers. As soon as they get to the shore, it just like slows all the way down.
Oblivious.
And the rest just slams in right behind it.
Yeah, they're not stopping.
No, they're not, because they're going 800 kilometers an hour.
And if you were me, you were farting the whole time. But that's another sidebar. That's another kind of disaster.
So basically the water piles up against the slowing edge of the wave, and that's where you get that iconic image of like a wall of water coming at
the
you.
big curl.
Yeah. So the instigating events, and this is the terrifying part, like the instigating events can occur hundreds or 1,000 kilometers from land. So like,
Well, that's what I picture.
they felt this shaking, but like it was massive at sea, but for them it's just like, a little bit of a rumble.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the distance it travels and the speed,
Yeah.
it becomes goes from a ripple to 30 meter wall of death.
Exactly.
And not the mosh pit kind.
No, not that. So early warning systems, they basically are targeted to detecting underwater disturbances through networks of hydraulic sensors, but they're not perfect.
Sure.
Like if you think of 2004 Thailand
Oh, yeah.
and 2011 Fukushima,
Of course.
which I'll probably talk about a little bit more. Where does the name tsunami come from? So since they only really become terrifying and devastating when they reach shallow water,
Yeah.
Tsu means harbor and Nami means wave. So it's basically a harbor, wave. But calling it a harbor wave kind of diminishes the
Sounds like
impact.
a resort.
Yeah.
Kick back.
Basically.
Have a Mai Tai.
Yeah. So I think tsunami sounds a little bit more intimidating.
Sounds like it would just kill everything.
Yeah.
And
Which
it will.
Well, we'll see.
Let's find out.
Let's find out. So basically the tidal wave hits. And then the book basically goes straight to the aftermath, which is a good place to go because another reason that tsunamis are so, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but they happen and then like it happens to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Like directly opposite from our last episode.
Right.
Fire of London.
Yeah.
A creeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tsunami, tidal wave. Pretty quick.
Exactly. The event itself, you can basically summarize with like a tsunami hit.
It's not hitting.
Like that's,
yeah.
it hit.
It
right?
hit.
Like that's, you don't, there might be like multiple waves, but you don't hear about like an ongoing disaster that lasts 4 days.
No.
The aftermath does though.
Right,
So
right.
upon visiting the Senriku area after the tsunami of 1896, a journalist compared the disaster with the explosion of Krakatoa in 1883. And just a little mini sidebar about Krakatoa, just to give a little context. Explosion heard 3,000 kilometers away for Krakatoa.
Cripes.
Shockwave traveled around the world 3.5 times.
No way.
Yep.
What?
And it dropped the global temperature by 1.2 degrees Celsius in the year following the eruption.
Ugh.
So maybe we'll talk about that in the future
Maybe
too.
we should put a pin in that.
But just to give you a little bit of like context for when they say that it reminded them of Krakatoa, it's like, okay, this is some serious devastation.
Yeah, and still pretty fresh.
Yeah. So this same journalist, he observed 50 kilometers of the coastline and found it completely devoid of life.
Okay.
The death toll is nearly 30,000.
Wow.
But there were survivors. So there were there's a bunch of crazy stories here.
Okay.
I guess the first group of survivors were fishermen out in their boats. They had no idea this happened.
Okay.
Because if you remember what I was talking about, how it starts as like a gradual
Yeah.
undulation, it doesn't really get serious until it hits the shore.
Right. When it hits
So-
the shallows.
Yeah, so they basically felt like a slow bobbing.
Yeah.
And then they didn't really know anything happened until they got home.
And they're like, where's home?
Basically, like, can you imagine you're out at sea, like fishing for your family,
Right.
and then you come back and you just have like splinters and bodies floating where your city used to be. And you just come back and you're like, what the hell happened here? I was fishing for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which again, and I guess, like, you just, I don't know, that part just blew my mind.
Right.
Where like the safest place in a tsunami is probably on the ocean.
It's origin point, more or less.
Basically.
And not too far from the ground zero.
Yeah, exactly. If you can choose a spot.
I think I'm seeing why this is your favorite.
Yeah.
It's quite fascinating.
Yeah. So,
keep talking.
basically,
keep talking.
yes. Well, any survivors on land were pretty much due to luck. So there's a couple stories here. One,
This is the good stuff.
there was only one. So the only survivors from one town in this region were a group of old men. They'd skipped the festival to play Go on the cliffs overlooking the sea. You know, Go like the white and black. Yeah.
Yeah.
You suck at. I'm so bad. I tried
I've never played it.
I tried playing it online, not even against a person, just against like an easy computer.
Yeah.
Kick my ass every time.
It's like a Japanese version of
Chess, but it's like
chess.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
It's like, yeah, exactly. It only actually interesting. I do another sidebar, just a quick one. Interestingly, it was like, it's one of the most recent games that an artificial intelligence beat a human at.
Oh.
So I think an AI beat Kasparov at chess in 97.
Okay.
And then computer didn't beat a person at Go until like relatively recently. I'd have to look up the year. Maybe I will. Maybe watch our Twitter and I'll post the answer because I don't have it on hand right now. But
you know he will.
I will. But yeah, like that didn't happen until at least the 2000s and like quite recently because it's a very complex game, especially for an AI. But anyway, so they decided to skip the festival and play Go on a cliffside.
Sure.
And instead what they got, instead of a peaceful evening watching the ocean, they watched their homes get obliterated by a giant tidal wave.
Shit.
Right? And that's like, if we want to talk about like the human experience, And another reason that like tsunamis are such like a relentless disaster, there's no take backsies. Like there's nothing you can do. They're standing on the, like, imagine the feeling of like watching your life get canceled right in front of you.
Helpless. Can't do anything.
Like you're up there playing Go and then you look down and you're like,
Great seats for the
right?
for the show, but good Lord. That's some serious survivor's guilt you got to look forward to.
Yeah, like
we skipped the festival. I'll go to the festival.
Yeah, right?
Oh,
and that's
shit.
exactly like, and like you were saying, the comparison with like something like the Fire of London, you see a fire start and you're like, shit, let's get down there and help.
Exactly.
Now it's like, I guess.
Let's go.
I guess it's my move.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what do you.
There's nothing we could do, guys.
Yeah. So in another town, this is kind of sad. In another, well, it's all sad. Not that
It's all sad, despite the fact that I'm laughing constantly.
Yeah.
It's more out of fascination.
No, exactly. Yeah. It's like what we were saying in the first episode. Like you laugh because like it's such a fucked up situation.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in another town, parents rushed their young children to high ground, and the children were saved, but the parents were washed away as they returned to get the rest of their children.
Oh, man. And yeah, I like the what was it, Sri Lanka, where the 2004
Thailand?
Yeah. And there's footage of that. And that's what you see, like people just being swept away. It's it's gut wrenching.
It is like the definition of a force of nature.
Yeah.
Like,
but that's another fascinating part of it for, like, again, fire, useful, a tool, but don't touch it.
Yeah.
You know, water.
Yeah.
Water's your friend.
Yeah.
You drink it, you swim in it.
Yeah.
It'll also kill you.
It'll also kill you.
It'll rip you apart.
Basically, yeah. It's like
with enough force, it's like slamming into concrete.
Yep, exactly.
Pretty crazy.
So some people, the third group of survivors, they survived after being washed to sea by clinging to debris.
Wow.
One small group of people were washed up on a nearby island without a scratch. Which, can you imagine that? Like you're preparing for the festival and then just like a few minutes of like, and then you appear on an island and you're like, am I dead?
Is this heaven? Yeah. That would be like skydiving, your parachute not opening and surviving.
Yeah. Basically,
somehow.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Just wow.
Exactly. And on that same note, a baby survived by resting on a floating mat in the middle of the destruction. Just like asleep on a mat floating around.
Way to go, baby.
Yeah. It's just, this comes back to what we were saying maybe in like the bomber episode where like human life is so like sacred, but governed by physics.
Oh, well, yes.
Right? Like at a certain point, like a wave washes you away and it doesn't matter what you did in your life. Right now, fluid dynamics is going to dictate where you go.
Yeah. Maybe a little baby has a much better chance than a full grown human.
Yeah, exactly. So unfortunately, most of the dead died by drowning, obviously.
Yep.
Okay, here's one old soldier mistook the roar of the wave for an invading army. He grabbed his gear and came rushing out ready for a fight. Which,
I'm sorry.
I know. I had that same reaction.
Godspeed.
Yeah, exactly. Because you were probably picturing the same kind of like,
just
crusty old
running
man
into the beam.
Yeah. It's just like the kind of guy who's always telling you like Civil War stories and all the things he did, and he's just like he hears the wave coming, and it's just like, oh, they're coming again. Grabs his stuff, like comes running out.
He's gonna punch a wave in the face,
basically. But when they found him, he was still clinging his sword. Yes. So he went out
to the bitter end.
Like that's a pretty solid,
I salute you.
If I gotta go, I want to go out fighting at Tsunami.
Yeah.
I don't actually though, because they're terrifying.
Oh, I don't.
No. So the cleanup. A French missionary was among those that were killed, so his Confederates came looking for him to give him a proper burial. They had to give up because of the horror of the aftermath. So thousands of human and animal bodies were strewn all over the coastline. Right? Remember that guy, the journalist who was going up and down the coastline looking for survivors? And he just basically found bodies. So he wrote a little bit about it. He said it was necessary to build fires to destroy the evidence of putrefaction because there were no disinfectants procurable. And the unconquerable stench of death and the smoke of the funeral fires hung over the land for days.
Ugh.
Right? Because see, like a tsunami is all about aftermath. The event itself is over in a split second, and then you're I'm sure Thailand's still recovering, right?
Oh yeah,
and that was 15 years ago.
Yeah,
now. It's going to take a long time. And this actually, that quote reminds me a little bit. I have to look up the source of this, but I remember hearing a quote about the cleanup of the First World War, because that was another situation where you had like tens of thousands of casualties at least per conflict.
Oh yeah, I've thought of that.
And there's a quote here that I'll have to find the source, and we'll post about it. But it's basically, if you've ever smelt a dead mouse, you have about as much an idea of the stench as a single grain of sand can give you an idea of a beach. So it's like we've all smelt, like we've dealt with a mouse in a mousetrap.
Definitely. It's a very, very distinct odor.
Yeah.
Like something has died.
So on an individual level, imagine like for one human body, I imagine amplify the size of that mouse by whatever, 100 to get to a human.
Yeah.
And then that by 30,000. Just
hard to imagine.
No, a nightmare.
But unforgettable once you're in it, I'm sure.
Exactly. So once the government finally entered into the area to take tallies and start the cleanup, they found almost 11,000 houses swept away and 2,500 damaged, 27,000 people killed, and almost 10,000 people injured.
Wow.
That's
considerable.
A space of like half an hour.
So there was just one wave that did all this.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
So like you had that earthquake at 7:30, and then 20 minutes later the ocean pulls away.
Yeah.
And then like right after that, pretty much right after.
Good Lord.
Like you don't really have that much time to do it. I imagine some people maybe knew their history and knew what was happening. So maybe like the people that actually did escape, like that one family who brought their kids to high ground.
Yeah.
That could only have been because they knew what was happening.
Right.
But that was not
They're
most
no stranger.
people.
No.
Like some people that didn't know what a tsunami was, they just like, oh, that's weird. And that's like your last
Why
thought.
is this happening?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it was not the end for Senriku District. In 1933, it was struck again by a 22-meter high tsunami.
God.
But this time there were early mornings and only 3,000 people died.
Getting better.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there was an
Still
ominous
catastrophic.
quote. I have a bit more. I did because I was so interested in this. I did a bunch of extra research, and I went quite a bit further than the book did.
Okay.
But at this point, the book ends with an ominous quote that says, "But who can guess when the monstrous sea waves may visit this beleaguered coastline once again?"
Well,
And how right they were.
you don't have. I mean, that's just stating a fact.
Exactly.
It's not if, it's when.
So as far as sidebars go, this one's a little bigger than just like an official sidebar, so I'm calling it a mini disaster because we're going to talk about the Fukushima meltdown.
Okay.
Because it's right in the same region.
Okay, let's go for it.
So the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant complex was located in the city of Okuma in the Fukushima prefecture. So Japan's divided into 47 prefectures. They're like, think provinces.
Sure.
There's a lot of complexity there, but think provinces.
Yeah. 47?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So and the region that we're talking about here, the Fukushima prefecture, it's south of Senriku.
Okay.
Which is just a region Senriku is a region that's extremely prone to tsunamis.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it's like the leading edge of Honshu, the main island of Japan. Like if you picture Japan as kind of curves up, it's a little bit of a banana shape. It's like right on the leading edge. Right next to it is the Pacific, basically.
Yep.
So any waves that are going to hit there first. Also, it has 36 bays. Which, like if you remember, the shallow water is what causes tsunamis.
Right.
Bays have shallow waters. It has a lot of region to like cause waves and break them up.
Right. Bad mix.
Yeah. So in 2011, the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami hit the Tohoku region, including the Fukushima prefecture. So this earthquake in 2011 was so powerful that you're sitting down. I can see you're sitting down. It was so powerful that it moved the island of Japan 2.4 meters east. It shifted the Earth's axis by 10 to 25 centimeters.
What?
And it increased the Earth's rotation by 1.4 microseconds per day.
Huh.
Big earthquake.
So, yeah, big one. It had planetary repercussions.
Yeah, it moved it moved a country 2 meters east. So it was a big earthquake.
I can see why they think that the gods are angry at them.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I'm going to just kick this country up.
Right?
Take that.
Yeah. Ugh. Okay. So the highest resulting tsunamis there were just over 40 meters tall. So the one that hit Senriku in 1896 was 30. Now we're at 40.
Yeah. Add another story to your house there. Okay.
So you remember You remember hypothesizing about what a plague would do if it hit a modern city?
Yeah.
And we're talking about like now we don't really get that because we have like modern medicine, so
Right.
like New York, but like this is basically what happens when a tsunami hits a modern city.
Aha.
So it caused level 7 meltdowns in 3 reactors at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant.
All right.
Guess how many levels there are?
I'm going to say 7.
There's 7. Yeah, so it caused 3 of these. And massive explosions at 3 plants following a buildup of hydrogen gas,
Oh, God.
following a cooling system failure. And maybe we'll get into how a reactor melts down in the future, because there's
Okay.
a few notable occurrences. Well, there's one that I'm thinking of specifically.
I can think of one.
Yeah. That's a disaster. This is like a disaster caused by a disaster. There's a lot of fallout from those reactors.
Yeah.
Like they evacuated people for like 20 kilometers around the area. Like, not great.
What's the distance between this factory and like civilization, basically?
That's a good question. You'd have to check, but there was certainly a city that serviced, at least the area where these reactors were.
All right.
So that had to be evacuated.
We'll wiki that real quick.
Yeah. And here's some other so this disaster resulted in 35 billion in insured losses. The Bank of Japan had to dump 183 billion into the banking system to stabilize the markets, and it had a total cost to the World Bank of 235 billion. All that to say, this was the costliest natural disaster in history.
Yowza.
So again, another point for tsunamis in my list, in my little like column for why tsunamis are my favorite disaster. Like they cause so much. If you're a homeowner, and you've experienced a water leak in your roof, then you know like that terror in the pit of your stomach that comes from seeing like water dripping down your walls, right?
Yeah. The bubbly ceiling.
Yeah. And you're just like, this is a problem.
Yeah.
Because water finds a way to go wherever it wants to go.
Yes, it does.
And there's no way to like, you can funnel it, you can build dams and stuff. But like at the end of the day, water's going to get in. So you're delaying water. You're never containing it. You're never blocking it.
That's right. Yeah.
So
well, look where we're at now in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. We're in a state of emergency because portions of our city are completely flooded.
Yep.
Not because it's been raining a ton.
No.
It's because it snowed a ton.
Yep.
And then it melts.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yep. And it's relentless.
Yep.
So I went like hog wild on tsunamis. So I've got another bit of trivia here. That's the end of the Fukushima meltdown. There's
what
more
though?
to
Like just to.
Yep.
I don't know if I'm remembering the Fukushima or the Thailand tsunami, but the images I always associate with the tsunami aren't necessarily the big tidal wave because, like you said, it happens so fast. You're not really going to see that. It's all the water coming inland, like in a big rush, and just this relentless, like it's a flood basically. It's more of a flood than a wave.
And that's where a lot of the long lasting damage comes from.
Yeah, like so that must be like an after effect, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So that's why
so that's more inland, like the wave hits, but the water's got to go somewhere, so it's going in, but it just keeps coming and coming, and it looks harmless at first. It just looks like a little babbling brook that's blah, 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 blah.
It's the long lasting effects.
Right.
It's like you get punched in the face so hard that you get a concussion.
Okay.
The immediate issue is that someone broke your nose and it hurts like a bitch. But now you're dealing with all of the aftermath for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And that's like the tsunami effect. Like it hits something, it obliterates what it hits.
Right.
And then it reaches far beyond where it hit.
Right. And then it floods everything.
Yeah. That's why.
But still, those floodwaters are deadly. Like that's where you see like people getting swept away and losing their stuff and their family and pets. And
it's so uncontrollable.
Yeah. And by the way, stop getting punched in the face. Like, get some better friends.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, bad analogy. So, bit of trivia here. Now that we're done that.
Okay.
Biggest tsunami on record?
Is it?
No.
Fukushima?
You're never going to guess.
Oh, okay.
Lituya Bay in Alaska in 1958.
58.
So it was an earthquake.
Alaska. Huh.
Earthquake triggered a massive landslide.
Okay.
Caused 90 million tons of rock and earth to dump into Lituya Bay. Yeah, I can tell you're sitting, so I won't tell you to sit down. The resulting mega tsunami washed out trees at an elevation of 520 meters.
Oh my God.
The Empire State Building with the spire was 443 meters.
That's how big the wave was?
Yeah.
No!
I know, right?
God.
You've seen Interstellar, right?
Yeah.
When they're on the water planet?
Yeah.
like that now that's rough. That's what we're talking about in terms of wave size. That happened on Earth. Yeah.
Like a human being saw that
There were
shortly, very, very shortly before their unfortunate, terrifying demise. But,
So-
oh my God.
So we're actually going to talk a little bit more about this one because we're introducing, or maybe we've introduced already at this point, a feature called Tragedy Tuesdays. So
Tragedy Tuesdays.
Yeah, this is going to be one of them, if not already is
Okay.
one of them, because there's more to this story. But I thought I'd slip it in here because it's a little bit of trivia about a tsunami that was half a kilometer tall. Terrifying.
Yes.
So just to
It's like staring Satan in the face.
basically like 30 meters, 10 stories, intimidating enough. I don't know. And this is maybe tying a few strands together, coming back to like the human mind processing disasters. 10 stories tall. I think you could still be like, that's a big wave. Half a kilometer standing at the base of it would be like, what am I looking at?
Yeah.
What's like, I just like you, nothing but standing there with your mouth open, right?
It would be impossible to process.
Yeah.
It'd be like having the moon in front of you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like what?
Like basically you see this giant half-kilometer wave coming at you and all you can do is like make peace with what you believe, kiss your ass goodbye and hope you see it in the morning. Like
If you even have time to,
if you have time to
process all
just do
that,
anything other than just like stand there.
like the rate and the speed that you described, like it would be, you'd think you were hallucinating.
Yeah.
I
yeah.
mean,
This is not happening.
it's unthinkable.
Your last thought would be
It's
"Nope."
just unthinkable.
So anyway, Sanriku District, coming back to what we were talking about before these, it was hit in 869, 1869. I think I've been saying 1896. It's 1869. So
Oh,
it was hit.
literally 1,000 years later.
Yeah, basically like hit in 869, hit 1,000 years later. So it wasn't the first time that it was hit in 1869 or 1933, and it won't be the last.
No.
The quote from the book that I said still applies. Who can guess when the monstrous sea waves will visit the beleaguered coastline once again? We don't know when, but we can say that it's certainly just a matter of time.
It's when, not if.
Yeah. And so just to like recap why tsunamis are my favorite.
Right.
They are terrifyingly relentless. Like there's no reasoning with it. There's no stopping it. Unlike the fire of London, like
You can
can't
fight a fire.
You can't put out a tsunami.
You can try to cure a plague.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing you can do.
Like you can put up barriers, but they only do so much. You
Right.
talked about the flooding that we have in Ottawa. Like there are flood walls, and they're underwater right now.
Oh,
so
yeah.
like as long as like if you guess the height wrong, it's
Yeah. Well, the height's been this,
Yeah.
so we're gonna build it here. Oh, well, now it's higher.
yeah, and maybe one day it'll be
Sorry.
500 meters.
Yeah.
And then like good luck protecting against that.
Yeah.
And they are just such like an awesome in the like tradition or classic sense of the word awesome.
Right.
They're such an awesome force of nature.
Right.
Like even, I said you could process it, but even like the 10-meter ones, even like a low tsunami, you'd still be hard pressed to actually like realize what's happening
Oh, yeah.
or certainly what to do.
It just puts humanity in its place.
Yeah. I actually had, this got me thinking of, I visited Scotland last year with my family
Yeah.
and we walked through the Scottish Highlands and I had like this kind of realization, standing at the base of just one of these. It was like a relatively low hill, but it's still like I would have called it a mountain. My brother-in-law Steve called it a hill because he climbs them like they're nothing.
Okay.
So it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. I need to go to the gym. But anyway, like so they're just like standing at the base of this hill mountain, and just realizing that like this piece of rock has been here for like millions of years before we as a species existed,
Right.
and is going to be there for millions of years after we're gone.
Oh, yeah.
As is the whole Earth.
Yes.
And it's the same with these waves. Like this is just like physics. An earthquake happens, it causes a wave. It happens to destroy like a city and all the people in it. But like we're here because of like flukes of evolution and things like
exactly.
that. So like nature doesn't care.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, sorry about that. Like
If the planet could talk, it's like, well, why'd you put your city there?
yeah.
I'm going to destroy it
Yeah.
some point.
Exactly.
I'll get around to it.
Yeah.
Time is different for me. I'm
Yeah.
the Earth talking.
Yeah.
right?
You're right. I got it.
I've been around for billions of years.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
you know.
So for all of these reasons and the reasons that I've said before, tsunamis are at the top currently of my list of disasters.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll think about what mine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no pressure. I'm not like putting you on the spot to come up with a disaster.
You have to have a favorite. It's
You don't.
morbid, really.
You don't have to. I know. Well, I say favorite. I'd prefer no disasters is my favorite. But if there have to be disasters,
my favorite is peace on earth. Shut up.
So that was the tsunami terror in Japan.
Oh, Christ.
We're going to talk about more waves in the future, but this was a disaster.
That was a disaster.
Yeah.
Many disasters.
In fact, yeah, a couple. You got some bonus
You got some
disasters. in
bang
there.
for your buck on this one.
Yeah. So thanks for subscribing.
Thank you.
So what did that make you listen to?
Well, so this time I thought let's try to think of some Japanese music. I mean, there's some fantastic music from Japan.
Yep.
So I came up with it's a band called Zeni Geva
Okay.
from Tokyo.
Yep.
Started in the 80s. I don't think they're around anymore, but maybe they still play every now and then. But it's mostly the brainchild of guitarist, singer KK Null.
Okay.
And I guess they're a metal band, but they kind of do noise rock. They kind of do post rock and prog, and it's an insane mix, but it's pretty relentless. So the song I came up with is called Autobody.
Okay.
From the album Naiha. And what to say? It is in English, but lyrically, it's just more vaguely to do with death and destruction, and so that's all right. Yep. But musically, I think it works because it starts in a pretty relentless flurry of like guitar, double kick, and just speed picking and shouting, and then so you could think of that as like the wave hitting, like you said.
Yeah.
But then it takes this really like sharp, abrupt turn into this weird droning kind of post rock, kind of math rock, almost with like, it's like clean guitars and that might work for the aftermath.
Totally.
Just like what happened. It's kind of, it almost makes you dizzy and it's sort of like, so that seemed like a good choice.
Awesome.
Autobody, Zeni Geva.
All right, check it out.
Yeah, check it out.
So my choice is a band called another one I've probably told you about. I'm basically just going through it. Now I'm putting it on all these bands that I've told you about. I'm putting it on record now. So you have like you have
no
to listen
choice
to them
but to listen to them.
But anyway, it's a band called Electric Dragon.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly when they were formed, but their first album was 2016. I say they as one guy.
Okay.
From the UK, and they're kind of like a dark wave, synth wave kind of band.
Okay.
If you listen to a lot of synth wave.
Little bit.
The album's called Dark Water.
Okay.
And the song, I guess my song choice is kind of a combination of two songs. It's the intro to the album and then the Maiden. And the reason that I picked it is because the intro is kind of this narration. The whole album is like a narrative about these sea witches and how they'll like basically trick you to going into the sea and going underwater, and then they'll just like drown you basically. And it's all like this dark imagery about like the underwater and things like that.
Okay.
So that like when I read this, that's the first thing that came to mind. Because it's super cool, and it also ties into a little bit like maybe not the superstition, but like the spiritual beliefs, or like what they initially thought caused the waves was like divine wrath, essentially.
Sure.
And then so it's basically it's this narration, and the music starts with this dark sort of atmospheric sample, and then it gives away to, as like if you're into synthwave, surprise, surprise, the beat of synthwave, which is like a driving, like rapid sort of ish beat, which is a little bit like the propagation of the tsunami, I thought. Yeah. But I'm going to be honest, it was mostly the narration. Okay. It was mostly the setup that kind of brought this song to mind. But it's pretty sweet. I recommend like all of his music, as I do with most of them. But
synthwave, but it's dark.
Yeah, I guess he calls it like dark wave, but it's like synthwave in a minor key.
Synthwave is usually quite pleasant.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna check that out.
So it is like maybe there's a little bit of like a juxtaposition there, because it is the kind of music that you'd like put on if you want to get shit done, because it's got like that beat that's like moving, but the whole texture of the album is pretty like dark, and you've got like a lot of underwater sounds and stuff. So that totally made me think of like tsunamis in the aftermath.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. So next time we're trying something a little different. It's the first installment of we're going off book. Remember how we talked about on book? Now we're going off book for something we're going to be calling Film Fiasco. So we're going to be discussing what happens when the sun is dying. and you're all that stands between oblivion and survival of the human race.
Can you guess what movie?
Tweet at us if you can. But yeah, so that's this episode of This Is a Disaster. If you like what you hear, please hop on iTunes and give us a 5-star review. That helps us get the word out. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at This Disaster Pod. And yeah, tune in next time for more destruction.
Bye-bye.